Well, it's 10 a.m. in Centennial, Colorado, and it is October, which means it's Sensory Awareness Month. And I am really excited for this webinar today and delighted to introduce you to today's webinar hosts. I'm going to introduce them, and then I'm going to let them introduce you to our guests today. So our hosts today are Carrie Schmitt, a doctor of occupational therapy, quite a phenomenal occupational therapist who has worked in a variety of pediatric settings in Georgia, New York, South Carolina, and Colorado. Carrie holds curiosity as a high value and is continually seeking to further her knowledge. She is currently in private practice and serves on the Staff Institute faculty. Carrie hosts the Making Sense podcast, which is a Star Institute podcast aimed at professionals with curiosity about learning more on sensory integration. We've also got Gina Kreitz, who is a sensory-informed, neurodiversity-affirming, LGBTQ plus allied, culturally sensitive and attachment-focused therapist, and an exquisite mental health support provider who strongly believes in the transformational process of making sense of our experiences in the context of relationships where we feel deeply seen, heard, and understood. She's a psychotherapist, MFTC, and a licensed occupational therapist, which is a very unique combination, and provides mental health services to families, couples, and individual children, teens, and adults at Between Psychotherapy in Lafayette, Colorado. There is more information to be found at betweenpsychotherapy.com. I'll drop that link in the chat. And other than that, I'm going to hand over to our hosts and join as a listener. If you do have questions, please can you drop them in the chat? I'd like to ask everyone to be muted and stay muted throughout, apart from obviously our esteemed speakers and guests. And we will be monitoring the chat and making sure that your questions get through. But because people are sharing their stories, we really want to give them space to do that uninterrupted, and then we'll have time at the end. That's enough from me. Thank you so much, Carrie and Gina.
Thank you, Virginia. I really appreciate that. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Today, we're lucky enough to have 3 guests who have lived experience with sensory processing differences. Not only do our guests actively contribute to their own sensory health, they also actively contribute to their community's sensory health. And so I'm delighted to introduce them to you today. Jolene, would you go first with introducing yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Jolene Gutierrez, and I am joining you from Denver, Colorado. I am a teacher librarian, and I'm in my library right now. So I'm a teacher librarian at Denver Academy, which is a school for neurodiverse learners from grades 2 through 12. And I've been here for almost 30 years as a teacher librarian. I also am a neurodivergent person myself. I have sensory processing disorder. I am the parent of kids with sensory processing disorder, and I'm also an author. So I, for the last few years, have been working on writing the books that I would love to see in the world, the books that I needed when my kids were younger. And my most recent book, Too Much: An Overwhelming Day, is all about sensory processing disorder. It's a short picture book with longer information in the back about sensory systems and sensory diet and things like that.
Thank you, Jolene. Ruth, would you go next?
Hi, I'm Ruth Woods, and I am a white, queer, neurodivergent, and non-binary person. I live in Portland, Oregon, and this is the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlicks, Cathlamet, Clackamas, and several other tribes. It's really an honor to speak today. So I've been a hairstylist for the last 23 years. And most recently, the last couple of years, I offer now what I call neuro-affirming hair care. I for myself, I found it really challenging to be in the salon environment. And when I discovered my own auditory sensitivities and challenges, I learned to work with it better. And then over the last few years, I started getting a lot of highly sensitive clients. And I had a way of working with them and helping them feel comfortable. So this has developed into this thing and a niche. And I'm creating right now a resource for hairstylists to help teach them how to offer neuroaffirming hair care. And it's just been a gift to see clients in the hair salon, which is a really overwhelming space, feel comfortable. So yeah, thank you
Great.
for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. Eliana, you're up.
Hi, I'm Eliana Wydra. I'm the founder and designer of Sensit. And a little bit about me, I was diagnosed with sensory integration when I was about 5 years old. I studied industrial design at Drexel University, graduating about a year and a half ago now. Wow. Sensit actually started as my senior thesis project, where I created a sensory multi-tool as a resource to help people like me. And my plan for the future of the company is to create more products that bring joy and comfort, and to become a resource for education and awareness of neurological differences.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So today we're going to have a guided discussion where we get to talk about lived experiences of sensory health. So Gina, would you start us off?
Yes, absolutely. So the first question is around what each of your experiences with sensory processing differences and being in the world has been. How does it impact how you are in the world, if it does?
I'll start if that's okay.
Great.
I have always struggled with various things. When I was little, I remember always squinting when I was outside and playing. My parents loved going to the car races, and I remember just, it was so painful. You know, they didn't have headphones. For me, they didn't think about that. They didn't think about earplugs. It was such a painful experience. And I remember looking at other people and thinking, how are they enjoying this?
Mm-hmm.
And all kinds of food texture issues, all kinds of issues with itchy clothes or certain clothes that are too tight, things like that. And those struggles persist today. When I was little, there was a lot of, I was a picky kid. I was a particular kid. They probably would have used the word diva if they had that word in their vocabulary. And I kind of grew up feeling that about myself and not knowing why I was different, and feeling like I was always a little bit of a burden or a little bit of a problem for others. And as an adult, I've become better able to name my needs. And I feel like around my students, it's a good model. It's good for me to say, this is too loud for me. I get really distracted by noises or things like that. So I've tried to definitely model that for my students. It's our homecoming week on campus, and we just had our pep rally, and I had to leave and go out to the lobby of the gym, and there were plenty of other students out there with me, where we were just kind of trying to find a little bit more of a quiet space where we could relax, because so many of us were, headachy or nauseous or just in pain from all of that noise and chaos and crowd. So I'm still trying to advocate for myself and also show others that it's normal. We all have sensory preferences. So that's kind of my experience.
How reassuring that must have felt for those students to see an adult out there as well. I imagine that would feel comforting.
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd say on top of that, because a lot of what you said, I relate to, a lot of fear of heights and stage fright as well. So this is very big for me too. Um, and like, for example, like having my nails too long or having nail polish, like I could actually like feel the pressure on my nails, um, which I thought was weird because everyone says that, oh, you shouldn't be able to feel it. And also like the selective to like sensitivity to sound and smell. I can't walk down the aisle, like perfume aisle in Macy's. I just cannot take it. Or like perfume stores. Can't go in.
So you have to be really careful about how you move around the world in that last example. You.
I'll go. So yes, the same. I relate to all of those things with like auditory, visual sensitivities as a child. So I can consider myself a highly sensitive person. I'm not diagnosed with autism. I've thought about doing a formal diagnosis, but I haven't. But with high sensitivity, emotions are a really big one for me, like empathy and feeling. So as that was a really big one as a kid, like feeling situations with my family, feeling situations with friends, and really not understanding how to like process feelings and even the feelings that would occur with with the auditory sensitivity, which is like one of the bigger ones for me. And so that I didn't understand this until the last couple of years. And then as a hairstylist working in salons, and having like these sensitivities and getting really overwhelmed, it often manifested as like I would start to feel like I was having a panic attack when I didn't realize, oh, I'm dysregulated. And so a few years ago, when I learned about high sensitivity and started understanding more about neurodivergence, it was just this like eye opener of like, oh, like I can do something about this. And then it helped. And then one thing that feels important to share, which I think this can be true for people. For me, my tools in the beginning were disordered eating and then like substances, alcohol. So I moved into those things as tools, trying to regulate myself. And then later in life, I realized, oh, like this is like one that's not going to help me, but that's what I was masking this whole time. So I'm sober and have been for several years, in recovery with the disordered eating. And then the last thing I learned, chewing. I learned that like chewing is a thing that helps regulate me. So that was a really helpful thing to understand with the food, is that actually that chewing helps to regulate me. So now I use like gum or gum primarily. Anyway, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think normalizing how protective defenses are used, to help us to survive and be in the world, until we're able to know more about what it is that we're experiencing and learn different tools. But I really appreciate you saying that and sharing that part of your story.
Yes, thank you all. One of the things I'm curious about is, was there a point at which you realized that it was sensory processing differences that were impacting how you were in the world? You had childhood experiences that did impact how you felt about yourself and how you felt moving through the world. But was there a point in which something made it clear that it was sensory processing specifically, and that was how you're uniquely wired?
So I was diagnosed when I was very young, so I don't completely recall. I know my cousin is an OT, so she told my mom about it, and she did research. My mom did research. However, I do vaguely remember going to a day camp probably a year before I was diagnosed and being overwhelmed and homesick and constantly crying for my mom. And I remember that she actually made me a like little box with a picture of her and I in it, and she filled it with kisses. So whenever I miss her, I take one.
For me, I realized that I have sensory processing disorder as I was navigating that route with my own kids. They had had some challenges in school. We had seen play therapists and done some social skills groups, and we had gone for testing. And as I was filling out some of the intake paperwork, I was like, me, this is me, this is me, this is, and so as I kind of worked my way through the forms, I thought, oh my goodness, I mean, genetically, they're getting this from me, but this is also, I identify with everything on this form. And so that was my aha. I always knew, I always, as I mentioned in my story, felt a little different. Um, Noticed that I was moving through the world differently than others, but couldn't pinpoint why or what was going on for me. So that was how I came to this.
For me, it was about 3 years ago, and I had a client who was a therapist who said, I think you need to read this book about high sensitivity. And so then I'm like, oh, okay. And so then I read the book, and then it explained my experience. Although my whole life, all along, people would just say, you're so sensitive, like, stop being so sensitive, stop crying, stop this. And so they're all yeah, along the way, people would like point that out to me, and not very nicely always. So yeah, so it was great to have someone offer that information.
I mean, it sounds like each of your stories includes other people. Eliana, your mom sent you with boxes of kisses, which felt, I'm sure, I'm going to assume, very supportive from the way you smiled and you told that story. And Jolene, you were finally able to see it in another person who is related to you and self-identify, right? And then Ruth, somebody very kindly made a suggestion that you were ready to hear about, investigating. So it makes me wonder, how can we all better support people who we see and recognize and feel aligned with over some challenges around sensory processing? Have you had experiences where it felt supportive, and you could also share experiences that didn't feel supportive, like stop crying, you're too sensitive, right? Like those things. But I just wonder, how can we do better? If you have any advice or any lived experience of when somebody supported you in a way that felt really, really good.
So one particular time stands out to me when I was hiking on a rocky, uneven trail on a school trip abroad, and actually the security guard um, held my hand. We were all the way in the back. Everyone else went ahead, and the entire time kept reassuring me that everything was all right and that I wasn't going to fall. There have been other instances like this that helped me feel well seen and understood, and that it was okay to feel this way. But it also helped me get out of my comfort zone in a way that I was comfortable with.
That sounds like a person who is willing to offer attunement to you in that moment and see you. That's lovely.
For me, I think I had so many battles with my parents over food, and would sit for hours not eating everything on my plate because I just couldn't, or I would get sick trying to eat everything on my plate because some of the textures were so yucky to me. And finally, there was a point in my childhood where I was able to verbalize and say, if you will just let me serve myself, because my mom was a homemaker. She felt it was her job to, she would cook, she would prepare the meal, she would prepare our plates for us and give us our plates. So I was able to advocate for myself and say, if you will let me serve myself, then I will tell you that I'll eat everything that's on my plate. If you just let me choose what I eat from the night's meal, or not choose it, and I can be hungry, if you'll be okay with that. And so my parents were flexible enough, because they weren't the most flexible people, to agree to that. And that changed everything with our food battles. And here at work, I mean, that did take some advocating on my part to get to that point. But then I think they finally saw, oh, she is able to eat this if she chooses it. At work, I am also the crier at work. I'm the emotional person. But I think I've been here long enough and they know me well enough that, they'll make sure they have tissues for me, or, they will tell me. I've had coworkers tell me that they appreciate my empathy. Sometimes it is a burden to me and to others, but I am thankful for others seeing me for who I am.
Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me that when we host, right, when any of us host, be sure that we're offering choice and agency to the people that we invite into our homes or into any setting. Let them serve themselves, for example, if we're providing a meal, so that they feel comfortable and seen and respected for their choices.
It really stood out to me how you said, mentioned flexibility. And I wondered if you had felt like people saw you somehow as being rigid or inflexible.
Did I see others?
Yeah.
Did others see me as being rigid? I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you feel that others saw you that way?
Yeah. I think those labels that, I was the difficult child, I was the picky child, I was the one who was always going to cause drama in some way. And I wasn't trying to. I didn't like turtlenecks. I didn't want to wear a turtleneck, on photo day. Yeah. And so I wasn't going to smile for the photographer because I was miserable, and I didn't like hamburgers. So, so yes, I was labeled as being rigid for sure, but I wasn't trying to be rigid. And I think,
right.
Likewise, they were just coming at me with their view of the world, and they could not understand how the world felt to me either.
Yes, right. It's so interesting because the rigidity really is on the other side. Do you all feel like you have, that really life has demanded flexibility from you instead of being in the world where there is flexibility from other people in the way that systems do things? Has it always sort of felt like that burden falls on you?
I think yes, to a certain extent. Yeah, feeling like how I am or what is happening for me is too much, and so then I have to modify or mask or change. So then that way I'm okay in whatever the environment is.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it's learning now to advocate, which Jolene said that about advocating for yourself in a kind, caring, but firm way. It's okay to take up space, to take up that space and say that. Yeah.
I wonder about that transition from masking and getting through the day to advocating for yourself. Like, I wonder about the transition and if there is a moment or a person or an understanding that helped you feel empowered to make that switch to self-advocacy. Or is it a function of adulthood? That might be another interesting way to look at it. Is it a function of, I think, children, right? A lot of times I talk to children and I tell them, you will not always have to participate in dress down days, right? Like, there will be a time where you can say, I don't wear turtlenecks anymore. I no longer wear jeans. But for some reason, a lot of the ways that the world is set up around children limits their agency. And so there is a point at which perhaps there is a moment at which some self-advocacy happens. And so I was wondering about that.
I'd say there's both, like, because at times, like, you're advocating for yourself, but other times in different situations, you don't feel like you can. So you kind of mask it to kind of suit the norms, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. I feel like I don't want to be rude. I don't want to be demanding. I will just try to go with the flow as best I can and suffer through things. Like if I were at someone's house and they served me a hamburger, I would eat it and I would try not to, show how hard it was for me to eat it because I wouldn't want to be rude. So there is a lot of masking, I feel like, but with adulthood also, we do have so many other choices. Like in my own home, I can choose what foods I want to eat. I learned that later with my dad too. He also had very specific foods he preferred. He just wasn't picky in his own home because my mom made his favorite foods. So we had that discussion as adults where I was like, well, you were just as picky as I was. It just didn't look like it in our house. And so if we had had those discussions earlier when I was a kid, that would have felt so much better. I try to model my self-advocacy around my students though, because I feel like it is important to name, you guys, I'm really distracted by these sounds or things like that, so that they feel more comfortable advocating for themselves as well and telling me what makes them comfortable. So I feel totally comfortable saying what I need in the classroom space so that hopefully they will then say what they need as well.
Right. Yeah, this is a great one. So I think it was later in life, like as an adult, learning to advocate for myself. But speaking about like a workspace, being in a salon, most of the time my salon is a little bit quieter and it works for me. But there are days where, when I have a client come in, sometimes I'm just having an off day and my system feels dysregulated. And so I've learned now, like to, when a client sits down, to say, like, I'm so glad you're here today. I'm noticing that I need to be a little more inner and quiet today because I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the sounds in the salon, and just letting you know. And it's felt really freeing to be able to say that, because often as a hairstylist or when you work with people, or with any profession or whatever you're doing, there's this expectation. There can be an expectation to talk and to communicate, and so it's freeing to do that for myself, to say that. And like with my clients now, it's like creating that space for them. So clients that come in that are neurodivergent or have sensory processing differences, they can talk to me about it, and they don't, like, it helps to shape, they have autonomy during their hair service to create, to help make it work for them. So.
That's beautiful. I hear you saying I went first, right? To all of you, I went first, and then opened the door for people to, also share. And then I also heard finding and creating safe spaces is what allows for advocacy. So how can we create safe spaces for other people to be able to practice their self-advocacy?
And have a good experience with it, right? With each of you within the relationship, to be vulnerable and brave and advocate, right? And then you all are responding positively to that and providing that experience. That's really powerful.
Ruth, could you talk a little bit about what that looks like practically in the salon setting? When you and I met and I got to hear a little bit about your work, I loved the way that you described giving your clients choice even before they begin and even before they walk through your door.
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, so one of the things that I have done is I've created for clients an optional sensory sensitivity intake form. And so there's just some questions on there that they can fill out and share with me about specific sensitivities, be it, the sounds, lighting, touch. So first off, before they come in, they're welcome to share about that, and they can contact me. Then on my website, I've got information listed. And so, yeah, it's so I'm kind of forgetting the question, but what I'll share is that it's been so wonderful to do that for people, and then to have the people reaching out, finding me, and then they sit down and they go through this experience. And actually yesterday I had an autistic client. It was my first time with her. And she didn't fill out the form before she came in, but then after we started talking, she opened up and shared that. And then towards the end of the appointment, her response, which is really similar to all of my clients that fit into this category, is that they're just like, wow, like I feel relaxed. I don't feel manic. I don't feel like I have to pretend. And then their faces like light, like they brighten up, and I can see like a physical relaxation in their bodies. And often for a lot of people, it's like, this is the first time I've ever experienced this, getting my hair done. And it seems like it's just hair, but everyone gets their hair cut. And even I won't talk for too long, but like even especially with children, like I'm looking forward to working with more children and doing this, because I think having an adult that can attune with a child during a really really sensory overwhelming experience, where a lot of times they're told, just sit down and we're going to get through this. I think it could be so beneficial in their development to have that kind of care.
So protective.
Thank you for sharing that. And if you think of any of the intake questions and would like to share them, even in the chat, I'm sure people would be interested. I could see people applying that to their own particular practice or business. When you were talking, I was thinking about the experience of being seen and feeling understood in your differences. And you were very good at describing the physical manifestation of that. A smile, a brightness, a relaxation, right? Their shoulders go down. They felt safe and seen. So I would love to hear, have you personally had any experiences of feeling seen or understood in your differences?
I can't stand the silence, so I'm going to talk if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's mostly around my book. So as I have shared the story, and it's a little short rhyming picture book. The main character, I'll open it to It's told from her point of view, and she wakes up and the sun is too bright and the alarm clock is too loud, and she starts out already having a bad day, and it walks you through her entire day, and there isn't much good in the day because she's so overwhelmed by all these different sensory stimulations. And so as I've shared that book in the world, just connecting with others who also say, this is also my experience, or this is the book I needed when I was a kid, or this is the book I need for my kids, has been so beautiful. I didn't realize there were so many of us who needed to hear stories like that until I've been working with this story. So that's been a really affirming thing for me to hear that others understand this story of my heart, and that in my hope is that it'll help support others.
Similarly, but for Sensit, I've been noticing the great responses, especially I was at the symposium over the weekend, and I noticed the great responses that I got from everyone there. And I noticed that we had a lot of conversations that I really related to, and a lot of advice. And I also asked them, a lot of the people, what their favorite wings were and why. And it was because of the different textures and of each and every wing, each and every fidget. Uh, so it really helped me see like the different perspectives everyone had.
Can you take a moment, Eliana, and share your creation, your sensory tool, so people understand the terminology around wings?
Yes.
I
So
myself have one of these now after symposium.
so this is a Sensit. It's a 7-in-1 multi-tool. So it spins. It has these what I call wings. It has different fidgets on it and textures. So I don't know if you could see. This one also spins. On this side, there's what I call a swirl. This one is a squishy wing, that's silicone, and then this one is a slide.
That's great. It's designed to meet a lot of people's different preferences. And Eliana was sharing that the next iteration of the Sensit will also make it so that you can personalize it for your sensory preferences. So right now it has particular wings, but you're going to get to pick your wing and make it be. And I told my daughter, you're talking about making it squishy, and she said, yes, please. So just some prototype feedback.
Thank you.
And we will share for sure how you can get one and get Jolene's book and get a Sensit as well.
Ileana, I had a curiosity. Was there like a moment that you can remember where the genesis of the idea for the Sensit came for you?
Yes. So when I came into the like industrial design major in my school, I knew I wanted to do something involving sensory processing, but I didn't know what, and I didn't know for like what age group yet. And through my research, I learned that there's more of a product need than a want for adults rather than children, because the market is so saturated with children's fidgets that I felt it was only right to make something for adults because they are less willing to advocate for themselves. It was also the design was slightly out of spite of my professors, a little bit. Because they told me to just pick one of the senses and stick with it. So I thought the better way of doing that was a modular design, because it felt selfish to me to just go with what I feel, and because whatever I feel could be totally different from what other people feel, and it seemed wrong to just customize it to myself. So with this design, you're able to fit it to your specific needs.
It's really cool and so important, right? That there are options. Yeah.
Exactly.
I was hoping that you were going to tell the story about your professors, in part because I feel like it was an opportunity for you to educate and build sensory awareness. Like they wanted you to just pick one sense and stick with it. And you were really able to educate them. No, we are multi-sensory individuals and we need multi-sensory supports. And that's really what we're describing today in each of your individual stories and settings, from working as a teacher librarian, to being in a salon. These are multi-sensory environments. And so finding ways to support every person, no matter how their sensory differences present within a multisensory environment, can be a bit of a challenge. And there's not one way. We're all wired. We're all, built a little bit differently.
I'm always learning from clients the importance of the context and the environment. So I'm thinking about how for one person, they didn't feel like they had access to stores or just day-to-day environments, things they needed to get done, because of the way the context and environment is and how it is not adaptable, really. And then in another environment, their sensory differences were a huge strength. So the sound sensitivity allowed this person to be an extraordinary birder. And that just really struck me, how it isn't one way all across contexts, right? And it really matters what the environment is like in terms of setting us up for success.
Have you ever had the experience of someone recognizing your sensitivity or your differences as a strength?
I'll lead with that, because with what Gina was just sharing, that came to mind at work. So as a hairstylist, I'm very detail oriented, and it takes me, I am a little bit slower and it takes me a little bit longer. But I'm very focused. So any hyper focus I have comes out into that creativity, and clients notice it and they really love it. And before I knew those were qualities of that kind of came along with my package, I called it my superpower of paying attention. And it's and sometimes in certain aspects of my life, it's a problem and it gets in the way, but I'm at the salon with your hair, this is where I shine. So that's been good to see it work both ways at the salon. And then I'm going to share a link to the sensory intake form. It's available via my website, but I'll put that through in the chat.
Ooh, Thank you for sharing. I know that everybody's going to be excited to see that and see how they can integrate it into their lives and practice. I just love that. And I think in the context of your work, I imagine that superpower of detail and people's appreciation for it makes them into return clients, right? And so hopefully, it becomes, something that not only do you see as a strength, but they repeatedly see and honor as a strength. Anybody else had someone see their sensory differences as a strength?
I noticed that the way I draw is very different than like someone else's because of like my perspective, like especially with perspective drawings. A lot of like design work has to do with that, and so it kind of relates to like, and in a weird way, like the fear of going down the stairs or down an escalator or jumping into a pool. Similarly, I use it as a strength to have more extreme perspective in those drawings, and it makes it a little more interesting, I find.
For me, I think my empathy serves me well in the writing world. I'm able to put myself in other shoes and imagine other scenarios and, feel that deeply. And hopefully that carries through in my writing as well.
Just the way you describe people's reaction to your newest book, I think you might have your answer. That people are feeling seen, right? People are feeling that you understand, and your strength and your empathy is coming through the pages.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
So there is a question from the chat, if you don't mind. Have you ever worked with or encountered individuals in your personal lives that have had competing sensory needs, or their sensory needs conflicted with your own? And if so, how do you navigate this issue? So right off the bat, I think of Jolene talking about navigating the complexity of living in a family and having food preferences. So that might be kind of an example of there's competing sensory needs in the same environment. And so have you ever experienced it, and how have you navigated it?
I feel like I navigate this every day with my different classes. I have a number of classes each day, and there are kids who want to drum on the table and or fidgeting their feet, or like they're needing to get energy out, or they're needing that feedback in that way, but then other kids who are bothered by that. So there's always a little finessing of showing respect for others and finding ways, like you can go out in the hallway and walk up and down if you need to, or like trying to find ways to accommodate those needs, but also show respect for each other and for me as a teacher. And that's where me naming some of my needs comes into play as well. But I think just everyone understanding everyone has different needs is the basis of that.
Thank you for that example, because I think classrooms are a place where there are a lot of conflicting sensory needs. And when I do talk to teachers and talk to them specifically about sensation and how it supports learning, I ask them to try to recognize their own sensory needs, because they are a participant in the in classroom. And so if they can name and understand their own sensory preferences, that can help them design the environment also to support them, so that they can be the leader and the teacher that they want and need to be. Thank you for sharing that.
Jolene, I had a question. How have you noticed that working that way as a teacher, like in a very inclusive way, has been supportive?
I think the kids feel seen and nurtured. They love coming into my library, and it's this beautiful historic chapel. So that's part of it. And it's filled with books. So it's magical in that way. But I think them knowing that they have a teacher who sees them, who cares, and who understands to a certain extent what they're feeling and wants to give them space helps with that respect, because there's respect on both sides.
Yeah.
I'm not like my dad saying, eat this food or you're picky, and I
Right.
set the space up to be everything I want it to be. It needs to be for all of us because we're a community.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Ruth, I was thinking about the context of salon care. And you were saying, for some people it's just hair, but I find it to be an intensely personal experience. Maybe it's someone is in my personal space, and so close to my head, which feels intensely personal to me. And I love the way you lay the foundation with the intake of trying to find out about, their particular sensory needs. But I can also imagine that in your past, in this work, that you may have had to do things in your job that didn't work for your sensory system, like tolerate a lot of noise or, work with fragranced products or things like that. So that I wondered if you resonated with that sensory conflict idea.
If my computer freezes, let me know. I'm having a little bit of a spotty internet connection, so hopefully it doesn't. So let's see, having like my own experience in the salon of the challenges that happen. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, like I can imagine over 23 years of working in, in salons, in this intensely personal experience. Someone in the chat said their relationship with their hairdresser is longer than their relationship with their husband, right? So we find people who serve us well, and we stick with them. But I imagine you've been asked to do things that might have felt like a conflict with your own sensory system.
Yes. So let's see. Yeah, absolutely. In the salon, like sound is definitely the biggest one, but now I'm working in a low toxic salon. My last salon, I developed adult onset asthma, and I was having asthma attacks with chemicals. So the smell of the chemicals. And so that was like, oh, there's something going on here. So having a sensitivity to chemicals. So that has been, and then I think maybe one other conflict that can happen, and this makes me think of like what was happening with the kids for Jolene, how one child needs to move a bit more, but then another one is like feeling a little off because another child is like needing to move to regulate themselves. Sometimes when I've had clients that maybe are a little more nervous and they're talking, and then they're talking a lot, that can get really dysregulating for me. And what happens is I can get like a rush of heat, a rush of irritation. That's one of the things that happens with my auditory stuff. And I can also get really irritated. And sometimes I felt embarrassment for feeling that, or I feel bad for feeling that way. But I've learned, I'm like, nope, I can, it's like feeling my feet on the ground and then like working through some of the sound things. So when that happens, and it occasionally will happen, it's advocating for myself. And so I'll stay quiet, and the person usually ends up noticing that perhaps, but then I'll say, hey, I'm noticing I just need some quiet right now. And I'm going to focus and look in and stay with your hair. So I don't explain to them what is happening. That doesn't feel appropriate. But it does feel like in this time and space, I do have to ask for that thing to continue working. Feels vulnerable sharing this. It's like behind the scenes, but it happens. Like I can imagine, and I'll pause with talking, but with like, Jolene, when you're working with children, like maybe that's dysregulating. What do you do? Or for anyone, right? Like how do we navigate those situations that can come up?
Thank you for sharing that. I know it is personal, and I think it's going to help a lot of people because you do also use a lot of sensation language, which I really appreciate. You feel a rush of heat, right? You feel irritation. Like I think for a lot of people, they might not recognize that as signs of dysregulation. And if you can tune into your body to ask what is this and what's happening, then you could utilize your regulation tools, like you mentioned, with grounding, with asking for quiet, with noticing language. So I think that's super powerful. Jolene, did you want to answer?
For me, usually it's not during the lessons that I'm teaching that I get overwhelmed. It's afterwards when kids are browsing for books and they're needing my help with that, and they're needing my help with prizes, and kids are wanting to check books out. And I have, many kids asking many questions at one time. And so there are times when I have to just say, like, give me 1 minute, like one person at a time, like I just need to triage this as best I can for the little moment. And sometimes I have had to say things like, I don't have the bandwidth to like think deeply on your question right now. I will do some research and get back to you later, or can we meet at lunchtime? Or, because there are times when it's just like, I can't, like I'm too overwhelmed with too many requests, too many things coming in at once.
Do you find that most people receive that well?
My students do.
Yeah.
I don't typically say things like that to adults. Like it's usually only in this classroom setting that I am saying those types of things. And students usually do. I mean, sometimes they want an answer and they want it now. And I try to help them understand, because it's a teachable moment as well.
Yeah.
Like I'm one person, our class ends in 5 minutes. I will get back to you, just to help walk them through why I'm asking for that.
Mhm.
I think they typically do. And if someone is struggling with that, then I will spend more time with them and give them what they need at that point, give them the answer, or do whatever they're looking for to help support them.
And again, from a modeling perspective too, how important that is to see other people talking about their experience and advocating in a way that's firm and kind and clear.
I resonated with that as a mom to 4 kids, that there are moments where I just need to say, this is about me. It's not about you. Like you might have a legitimate need right now and I'm feeling bombarded. Can I have a moment? Or I'd love to think about that and answer that. Or I use a lot of, like not now language, like I will be able to answer that. I just can't answer that right now for you. I'm going to think about that, or I'm not saying no, I'm saying I need time, or, just kind of putting it on myself and my sensory systems, or, my ears have had a lot today and it's night and they're going to need a rest. And we're going to talk about this more tomorrow, whatever it is, like identifying that it's my limited capacity. And there's nothing wrong with them needing or wanting or having a question, but that, in relationship, sometimes we have to wait or respect the other person's capacity to reply. And so that resonated with me.
In my work with neurodiverse families, this comes up a lot in terms of competing sensory differences and needs. And I always draw upon what a former colleague told me in her family they do, right? Which is talk about building this culture of mutual respect around differences, and that she can feel very overwhelmed by a lot of noise in the environment. And so they all have headphones that are accessible. And she'll put her headphones on and say to her kids, my ears just need a break, but I want you all to go on and like keep playing and laughing and being loud and everything you're doing, but I'm just going to put these on and give my ears a break. And that was a really powerful example to me that I've often used in my work with families.
I love that example because it's an example of staying in relationship, but honoring each other's sensory differences. So I had a teenage client, and her mom was struggling with wanting more closeness and connection. And the teenager felt closer to her dad, but her dad also had more respect for her sensory boundaries, and was able to be with her and be quiet, which is often what she needed. And so it was a great opportunity to coach the teen, but also, be in conversation with her mom about the ways in which she could be in relationship but be quiet. So he's tried like building in a routine that when mom got home from work, they would take a walk but not talk. And so they could be together and be in nature, but the teen wouldn't feel bombarded. And so perhaps they could build something into their routine that would allow for connection, and honor her daughter's sensory preferences. So I don't know if you've built any of those hacks into your relationships in your life, or if there's some people you have found it's easier to be in relationship with because they somehow are a sensory match, or maybe even have an intuitive or mutual respect for your sensory differences.
Ugh, I cannot stand the silence. I'm sorry. I always just am like, ah. Okay. For me, my daughter, when I would pick her up from college, I would be so excited to see her. I would talk nonstop driving her home. And, she gets car sick and she gets overwhelmed by noise. So she had to set boundaries for me and say, Mom, like I love catching up with you. I can't do it in the car. Can we please like not have noise, no talk shows, no voice from you, just some music that like some gentle music as she's trying not to get car sick on the way home. So she definitely set those boundaries for me. And it was an eye opener where I was like, oh yeah, I should pay more attention to that.
And I love that she felt safe enough to say, hey, can we do some music? I was thinking about how powerful transition is, and that it's a really powerful time in our days that doesn't get enough attention, maybe. And that a lot of us set up transitions that are regulating, and don't even realize it. So I was thinking about transition from college to home. Like what a transition, right? College life can be so different. And so, she got to get picked up. But for her, a support in that transition might have been music. And so my mom worked about 30 minutes away from home. And had a house full of teenagers to come home to. And I do remember her saying that her time in the car was really special to her, that it was a transition. She's a marriage and family therapist. And so it was a transition out of her professional role and into family life. And she set up that transition and used that transition time to regulate her nervous system and prepare to enter back into family life, busy family life. So I just wondered, I know it's a new question, but can you think of any transitions in your life that you're building regulation strategies into? And maybe hadn't recognized it until today. And it can be from the way you wake up to the way you commute, to maybe you do something at a specific time every single day.
Transitions, those I struggle with transitions and have struggled with them my whole life. And I would say in the past, food is something that I used as my tool, which is not a great tool, but it served its purpose. And now like coming home for me, a lot of it is like proprioceptive. So it's like pressure on my body, foam rolling, rolling my hands on a tennis ball, like things that were like, pressure to my body. Like when I think about transition, like if I think what would this look like in the salon, in particular, like with children. So like having children come in before their appointment. So when they come in, it's like doing little activities with the kids. So it's like I'm prepping their nervous system. I'm not doing any treatment, like I'm not treating them, but they're definitely like little activities that I could do with them to help that transition. And then like, getting them into the chair. So it could be like wall push-ups, like little like crawling, like doing like little like a bear crawl on the floor, or I have some sensory tools, things for them to squeeze. And then making doing those things normal. So it's like normalizing, like it's okay to need to do things to transition.
Mm-hmm.
So
I would say being someone who just transitioned out of college and is now in the real world, it has been very hard because I'm so used to being given a schedule and having to stick with that. And now having to make my own schedule and not depending on anyone except myself. I've noticed I've had a little bit of a struggle with that. And I know that, like, if I have like an appointment or something, I will be there, I'll be on time. But if it has to do with myself, I'm like, oh, I can take time. It's fine. It's just me. But trying to work on it because I know what I have to do is important. So if anyone has advice, actually, I would love some. um, but yeah, that has been a definite transition there.
I would just say notice what works for you. And, even if it's making a deliberate effort to capture some of that in whatever way feels supportive, whether it's writing it down through reflection, noticing it in the moment and making yourself a note or a voice memo. Just notice what works for your body and start collecting what does work. Because I think a lot of times we spend our reflection time in what doesn't work. And it's hard to build a schedule or a routine when all we have is a collection of the things that don't work for us. And then from an interoceptive standpoint, I love to start with the question, how can I make this moment more pleasant for my body? So I have to sit down and write a report today. How can I make that more pleasant? Perhaps I could have a cup of tea or light a candle, and that would make this moment more pleasant for my body. And so just to start collecting, information from your own body, from your own system.
Carrie, to that point, I remember before when I started working at STAR as an occupational therapist, working with adolescents and adults, and being immersed in learning about and working with others around sensory processing and integration, I left for the day and got in my car and was feeling overwhelmed and overloaded. And I just had the idea to turn the radio off. I don't really know where it came from. I think it, is top of mind considering what I was learning and what I was doing for work. Because this was just, 4 years ago. And it made a huge difference. Like something so small, like turning off the radio and sitting more quietly in my car for my commute home, created a whole different emotional experience for me, right? And turning it off and hearing the quiet, I felt relief. And like that has always stayed with me.
I do want to make sure that we get to one final question, and then we can check in and see if there were some questions from our listeners and audience. But I would love to hear what you wish your family, your teachers, practitioners, business owners knew or could know about you or about us, about sensory differences. So Eliana, would you mind starting?
Sure. That my responses or reactions were never an overreaction, that what I felt is what I felt, and just because my reaction was bigger than another person's or different from the reaction I had before, it doesn't mean that I was pretending. Everyone processes sensory input around them differently, and from one moment to the next, how one person interprets that sensory input can be different.
I
Go ahead. I just saying, well said.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Really, really well said. Um, I like something that I would want maybe different. I want more awareness and education for people, like families, all like the families, teachers, like all these professionals, just to understand like, hey, this is here and this is a thing. I'm 45 this month, and I feel like my age group and like younger or older, it was often like it was just this, like there wasn't as much awareness or knowledge, and you were just a disruptive child, acting out. And so yeah, I found the more awareness I have, the more information I have, the better I feel about myself and about other people, and how I actually like my ability to give anyone just more space to have their experience, like that's grown with more awareness and education.
I totally agree with what both of you said. Yeah, 100%. And for me, I've already kind of shared my own childhood, which, yeah, I'm 49. So same thing. There was just not awareness. And I feel like more parents and more people are absolutely aware now, but there's still work to be done. So my biggest wish is that kids will be given choice and voice. Like we will consult with kids about, well, why are you not wearing this, eating this, hiding in the corner? Why are you, why, what is going on? What is happening? How can I support you? And then giving them choices so that they aren't confronted with these hard days every day.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think, through your story, you showed a child who did have a hard day due to their over responsivity to the sensory inputs that they were receiving. And I think it is a great question for us, right? Like, how can we make it? Why that people don't have to have hard days like that unnecessarily. There's enough hard in the world without that. Sensory processing disorder is not in the diagnostic and statistical manual. And yet each of you were able to say and used your own terminology, whether it was sensory integration or sensory processing disorder or highly sensitive. How do we support and recognize people who identify with sensory processing disorder or sensory integration or highly sensitive personality types or personhood? How do we support them without the medical acknowledgement, official medical acknowledgement? And perhaps you're just going to say it's in terminology, that we identify as we identify, and somebody will connect with it. But if you have any ideas, that question came from the chat.
Well, first, I think it's just removing any kind of stigma or anything where like if it's bad, or there's like something wrong. Like one thing that came to mind is, when people talk to me about different things that go on for them as clients, or if there's like a tool or a thing that they use, like I'll ask them, like, what do you do to regulate? And, they'll say something, and sometimes they might be a little embarrassed to share it because it's maybe different. And I'm like, oh, cool. That's awesome. Or even like mental health. That's like another topic. Because I imagine a lot of us with sensory processing sensitivities, anxiety, that's part of our experience, and probably like depression. And it's like learning that like we can talk about that. And that's something I do with my clients. It's like, oh, you feel really anxious, or, oh, you're having a depressive episode. It's like, it's okay. Like, so there's no shame.
Yeah, I agree. I think normalizing things, whatever our coping techniques we've discovered or whatever tools we've found, is so helpful. And I do a lot of like diversity and inclusion work here in my teaching as well. And it's the same, tell me more about this. Tell me what terms you would like to be, like, what are your words? What are your terms? Tell me more. Help me know how to better support you. I think the more we can communicate in that way and just normalize it, the better.
And to that point, basically having either having or being that outlet and that optimism for someone else, or to yourself, or to anyone.
Yes, yes, and yes. Another question that came in: have you noticed any changes, new sensitivities, like more sensitivity as you've gotten older or post-COVID? So someone had a history of COVID and has many issues in their nervous system, and they're noticing sensory changes. So does anyone else have that experience, either with aging or with, a post-virus presentation?
I feel like I'm talking a lot, but so one thing I have noticed, just like a trend with my clients that come into the salon, I feel like since the pandemic, absolutely, there has been like a heightened sensitivity, or like, and I've talked about this with therapist clients, but it's because of the amount of stress that has come in, masking isn't as easy. So all of whatever is happening is coming up to the forefront. So yeah, there is definitely my little science lab in the salon. There is like a trend where, yeah, like people are having a harder, like not able to mask.
Thank you for sharing that. I resonate with that. Gina, you had a client who had a story that you'd like to share.
Yeah. So I think the part I want to share is how she incorporates advocacy into her life by like setting a goal for making 2 or 3 phone calls in a week to different businesses or environments that she's been in that have significantly impacted her in a negative way, and is, talking to whomever, right? The manager, let's say, and just providing education and awareness, maybe also pointing out the piece that was impacting her and making their business inaccessible, really, and maybe a possible solution, right? But just kind of having a voice and finding a moment of empowerment and her courage, to do that. Because it's, speaking for myself, advocating is really hard for me. And there is a lot of anxiety and fear about how I'll be responded to. So it does take a lot to put myself out there, right? So anyway, I want to highlight that as a possibility for anybody that's wondering, what could I do in some small way for myself, maybe, but also for the community. And really, as a business owner, those are the things I would want to know, because people aren't thinking about that yet. Right. But if I found out that customers couldn't come in, I think that would be really important. And I have found in my own work and life just how much trust gets built when people can talk about and ask for what they need. And I can provide that, hopefully, right? But like trust, I think, on both sides, and just how important it is to relational health. And that when we don't, how devastating it is, right?
Gina, before we kind of wrap up, can you just share a little bit about your work and about the service that you provide to clients? I know you, so I know a little bit about your background and your training, but maybe how is it a little bit different than traditional talk therapy, and maybe how it's the same.
I think trying to think where I want to start. There are a couple of parts to that. So my first career was in occupational therapy, from an OT role. I last worked at STAR with adolescents and adults with sensory processing differences. And so now I have transitioned to marriage and family therapy. I'm a MFT candidate, so I'm just accruing my hours for regular licensure. But how does it show up in my work now? I think I am thinking about the environment. I focus on work with neurodiverse couples, families, neurodivergent individuals, children, teens, adults. But how is it different? Like a small way might be asking all of my clients to, tell me if something in the environment isn't working for their nervous system, because often it's a pretty easy fix, right? Something as simple as like turning off any overhead lights and making sure there's adequate lighting through lamps, or making sure there's fragrance-free soap in the bathroom to use when they wash their hands, So I think just considering environment and context and how important it is, and then giving permission and also just encouraging feedback as a way also of building the relationship. It's really important to the work itself. I work experientially, so I'm emotionally focused, and how that would show up would be around helping to foster attunement to felt sensations in the body. That's what our emotions are. So I would do that with anybody. So that's maybe one example of how it's the same, but I think that's really important. And I certainly understand how difficult that can be, and how slow we need to go around that when people have wisely, unconsciously, protectively, adaptively disconnected from their body to function. So I'm trying to think if there are other examples.
I think that's super helpful.
Okay.
And I think people can really hear the care that you have in all of that description. So thank you. So I just want to quickly make sure each of our participants can tell you how to connect or find them or their service or their product. When people asked in the chat, then Tori was able to link to both Sensit and to your book, Jolene. And so there are some links in the chat if anybody wanted to pick up those links. But Jolene, would you start? How could people connect with you and find your book?
Thank you. And Tori, thank you for posting the link there. It should be available at bookshop.org, which is the link. And I love bookshop.org, but you can find it at any local independent bookstore or anywhere online that sells books. And I'm going to put my website in the chat. It's www.jolenegutierrez.com if you want to learn more or reach out.
Thank you. Ruth?
Yeah, so I will, let's see, I'm going to put my website in the chat so you can find me there. Hopefully maybe that's not a full link. I'll do like a better link, but that's a way to find me, and there's information on what I offer, what I do. And then I also have an Instagram account. I'm not as active on there now. But yeah, there's things there. And I just want to say, I will have to step away right at 10:30, but thank you so much for having me on here. And Jolene and Eliana, Gina, no, I might have said it incorrectly. That's correct.
Gina, it's okay.
Gina.
Spell Gina. Yeah.
And Carrie, thank you so much for having me here. And
Thank you for being here. And can you remind people where you are in the world, Ruth?
Oh, I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Okay. Just in case they wanted to see you in person.
Yeah, so. I know somebody who might travel to see you.
I would love that. And just to put out there for anyone that is listening, the resource that I am wanting to create for hairstylists, it's absolutely a collaborative. It's a collaborative project. The Star Institute has offered to assist with a couple of pieces. I spoke with Tori about that. But so if anyone feels excited or has information or would like to collaborate, reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Eliana.
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the social media on at Sensit Life. And the link for the Etsy store that I have will be there. So you'll be able to find me.
Yay. Yay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us as well.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for being vulnerable with your lived experiences, and you've enriched all of our lives by sharing your viewpoint. And Gina, is there anything you want to say?
Just thank you so much for all that you're doing. And just to highlight again the importance of creating different relational experiences for people, that it can be safe to talk about their subjective experience and a need. That's so important to change. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And the chat is just saying thank you, thank you, thank you. And great job, everyone. And really smart way to present information, and people are really connecting with it. So Tori or Virginia, do you have anything that you need to add, or anything you'd like to add?
We do not, apart from it's Sensory Awareness Month, and we would love people to continue to share and share and share and share the stuff that we're putting out on social media. I want to make sure you know that you can also find Carrie Schmitt on Instagram, where she posts really excellent kind of tidbits, and they're not reels, are they? Because they stay around, but short videos. I'm old. I don't know what's what, but find her on Instagram, and maybe Carrie, if you haven't, put that in the chat. Yeah, thank you everyone so much. We can't do this without you. If you do feel inclined to support STAR, the smallest gift really helps. And we have easy ways of giving on our website, and it's very much needed at the moment as we try to do this work in a culture and environment that isn't necessarily wired that way. So thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Gina. Thank you to all of the guests so much. And we look forward to seeing you all soon.